So here we go. So we're going to speak about, it's more like the teaching methodology, how we can, so I've got some mindful asana transitioning here. I've written a little thing, and teaching tips, considerations, and general alignment principles. So we'll kind of work our way through some of this. I'll just kind of touch upon some of the stuff that I've written for you, because obviously I've written it and you can go back to it and really, like, if you print it off, you can underline it, or you can go back and just look at it, and it might go in a bit better. But there'll be stuff that I'm going to explain from my perspective or demonstrate that won't be in the, won't be in the handout. So that's why I'm not just reading out handouts or I want to share what I get from it to you guys to get an understanding, and also be here if you want to ask questions on any of this stuff as well. So, oh, that's a fine cup of tea today, I tell you. So asana transition. So transitioning in asana may refer to moving in or out of a pose, or moving between poses. It's considered a sign of advancement in practice when we're as mindful doing transitions as doing aligning and holding poses. So transitions are an opportune time to practice mindfulness. So let's just look at the teaching considerations here. So a key teaching is to slow movement down and to move mindfully with the breath. So you're going to focus on the weight bearing or the grounding aspects of a pose, and conscious, mindful weight shifting during the transition. So transition are often executed with an exhale. So a long, slow exhale can support the transition. So moving you out of somewhere into your exhale. And other focus points during transition may be a drishti point, a gaze point, core engagement, or using the bandhas. Something to be aware of with moving asana transitions, that we're speaking here about more of the hatha yoga or vinyasa yoga, because, or ashtanga, that's we can transition with that. But as I said, with the yin thing, you've noticed when I taught yin, or if you've been in other yin classes, it's a little bit like, oh, you go into a pose for up to at least 3 minutes. Then afterwards, you come into the rebound and allow that to resonate, or marinate in your body, and then you do the other side 3 minutes, and then allow the rebound. And if it's too if it's too asymmetrical, you would maybe try and balance it with a symmetrical. But as I said, with yin, there's no worry about the shape. If we're in Paschimottanasana, you would be really working with keeping Jalandhara Bandha. You'd be wanting to really still keep the core engaged. So as you inhale, open up in the chest. As you exhale, draw the belly button back and up, and really work with the alignment of the spine, trying to keep the cervical spine in line with your thoracic and your lumbar spine. But in, I think it's called, I'm terrible at remembering the English of things, and I really need to remember with the yin stuff, because I'm going to be running a teacher training in yin, so I need to up my game a little bit. So I think it's the caterpillar, they call it. So in your seated forward bend in yin, you're just to flop out. If your feet want to flop out, so if we're Paschimottanasana, you're flexing your feet towards you, you're keeping the engagement, you're very mindful, and it is about the alignment. Yin, and you're not so much about this pose would be good for this one or this one, but some of them, I like the transition in yin from going to Supta, Ardha, and Virasana. So supine, half superhero pose, with one leg back. They call it the half saddle in yin yoga. A good way of like stretching out and rebalancing is coming into like a they call it the crescent moon pose, but they call it the dragon in yin. So actually you're stretching out your quads, doing it on one side, doing the half saddle, but then by moving into the dragon, you're stretching out the psoas and doing different things, but it's actually a good release. So I suppose in a way that would be a transition. And you from speaking about in the past live sessions when we're speaking about preparing for poses and counter poses, when you're working with Kundalini yoga, and Kay, I know you do a lot of Kundalini yoga, so you'll know that sometimes it feels a bit clunky from moving from one to the next, and they don't, with the Vinyasa Krama and various other lineages, you would go from back bending and then go into forward bending as almost like a counter pose. But Kundalini yoga they can go deep back bend without any warm-ups. Like you go, let's go into Ustrasana 55 times. And then, and then they'll go and do this and do that. But sometimes they'll do forward bending first and then go into back bending. And the same, I've had a few people question, I had in a couple of years back, I ran a teacher training, and this person was really into their Sanskrit, and they kept questioning my pronunciation of it. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I've not pronounced it right. I'm sorry. But I was like, but in ways that it questioned my my teaching of Kundalini as well, or my teaching skills, because he's like, well, you're when you're moving forwards, you're inhaling. It's like, well, yeah, so Kundalini yoga, the good thing is what they're doing is, when we were speaking this morning about the neural pathways, this is something that Kundalini yoga is great for, changes the neural pathways, because things that we get very, very comfortable with, this is our Anga Banga sadhana, the stuff that we are drawn to that's not so good with us, but we feel comfortable with, as opposed to Sarvanga sadhana, which is supported practice. So we go with something that we need as opposed to what we want. So when you're working with Kundalini yoga, it changes your mind, where you're going, what? If you've been practicing Hatha for years and all of a sudden they go inhale, fold, exhale, up, all the Hatha yogis are going, what? What is she doing? She's doing it wrong, because they're so used to their neural pathways are going, fighting with each other, saying, help, help. And it's great for you, It's the same with some of the stuff where you have to leap around being a weirdo. It's like we're so contained in who we are, having to be socially conditioned to be a certain way, that if you come out of your comfort zone, afterwards though, you're like, whoa, your brain's going, and the prana starts to really flow through you. So as I'm speaking about transitioning, so this is like coming from like the lineage of, let's be like, make it pure in a flowing way if you're wanting to teach a sequence of flow. But the only thing is, it's like there is still rules as such, but knowing what your purpose is, as long as you go in knowing, right, there is no rules, I'm going to do that, that's your rule. As long as you know that whatever you're doing is not going to hurt anyone, and it's not going to affect the nervous system too much, it's not going to, as long as you're safe and you know what you're doing in that way, well, the Kundalini stuff, it's fine, so it's instead of, you can't go in and make stuff up as you go along. So yin is yin, Kundalini is Kundalini, but I like to teach a bit of Kundalini flow, so I like to incorporate Kundalini techniques into a tantric Hatha flow. But I know what my intention is and why I'm doing it, and I know what the structure of that is. As much, you can sometimes be like, what's she doing now? So it's knowing at what stage do you do a proper transition. And another thing that I really you've seen it in so many classes, so I'm not judging any teachers that do this, but if you're going to have a long-term practice and you don't want your joints you don't want wear and tear in your joints, make sure you're not moving you in and out of poses that just because they've got the same name, you know. So warrior 1 to warrior 2 is not a good transition just because they're both called warriors. The stance is completely different. So remember, they're heel to heel. For warrior 1, you're heel to heel, hips are square. It tends to be a shorter stance. Warrior 2 is a wider stance. Your heel to instep and your hips are facing the side of your mat. And it's the same with Utthita Trikonasana and Parivrtta Trikonasana. I've seen that in so many classes as well, where it's just clunky because I've been in classes where and because I'm really aware of my body, and I like to keep, if I'm doing a vinyasa class, I like to keep the alignment right so that the prana can move through me. So I don't want to be messy with it. So I think I am a little bit of a weirdo here. But you know, I've been in classes where they're going from Utthita Trikonasana, extended triangle pose, into Parivrtta Trikonasana, revolved triangle, because they're called triangles. But everyone's doing this flow, but they're unsteady on their feet because they're doing a pose. One of them is going to have to be not in alignment, so your foundation isn't good, you know. So I end up getting like behind everybody because if I'm going from one to, I need to know that my feet are in the right place and I feel grounded first before I move into the asana. You know, I think that's far more important than keeping the warriors together and keeping the triangles together. So good transitions for, so just thinking, if you're thinking about when you're writing up classes to teach, think about what asanas go with what in that way. So looking at, if you're thinking about standing postures, which ones go together? Like warrior 2 works well with Utthita Parsvakonasana, so that is extended side angle pose. It also goes well with Utthita Trikonasana. You can also do quite a good transition to Ardha Chandrasana, the half moon pose. Bound, you can do a bind and go into the bird of paradise from warrior 2. So thinking about, and goddess pose, come into goddess, you can turn to the side and then do Prasarita Padmottanasana, standing forward bend. So then think about warrior 1. What works well with warrior 1? Parsvottanasana. That's the, you know, there's so many different English names for it. It's like east to head, west, and you know, all this sort of thing. When I teach children, I call it the magic elf. But you know the one I mean, Parsvottanasana. So Parivrtta Trikonasana, and warrior 1 to warrior 3 is quite a good transition as well. So think of different ones that you could go into Natarajasana perhaps, or you can go try and flow into Garudasana, eagle pose. So think about where you can go with them, and you can make interesting sequences as you know, but think about what would flow into what. You know, another good transition I like to work with is Janu Shirshasana. So what's this? So Janu Shirshasana, this one with your here, you can't really see me here. And then folding forward, and then a good transition is to get the long leg, lifting it up and taking it over, and then moving into a twist, and you can take your twist further. From there, if you want to take it even further, you can go into a side crow. You really want to, and from the side crow, go into scissors pose, go mental there. So, and you know, you can go from Malasana, squatting pose, because you can, a good transition from doing belly back bends, from being on the belly. So I would say from, you know, I've already spoken to you about segmenting classes and how to teach and the way I would do it but you know, from getting from standing poses, you may be doing some balancing after doing your standing poses or after doing some vinyasas, doing like almost a vinyasa down into like downward facing plank pose, and then onto some belly back bending. To transition out of that, I either come up onto my knees and do the breathing, you know, or come into Chakravarkasana or into Malasana. So Malasana is always a good one to transition from. So transition from belly back bending. It's a good counter pose from back bends, and then from there that's when you can even move into if you want to do forearm balancing. That's a good transition for that. I would say standing, you know, the standing forward bends when you're doing your standing postures, if you're doing vinyasa standing postures, from standing forward bends, a good transitional time to move into inversions, you know, as a, you know, say that not putting an inversion right at the end of inversions right at the end of the practice is a great thing to do, but a lot of teachers do it. But you know, there's no judgment in the room here, as you know. This is me just teaching you the foundational stuff. And if you read The Heart of Yoga, which you should have done, Deshi Shikar, you'll know that what I'm saying is what's in that book. So you can go back into it and really go back to it. And so you could transition. So from coming from into Malasana, then you can move into Navasana and work from there. Another transition is Trianga Mukha Pada Paschimottanasana. You know, this one with one leg back, coming forwards. I like to come into Kranshasana, the heron pose, and then from there take the opposite hand and move into a twist that's going to stretch out the IT band. There's some things that just flow really well, you know, and the only way that you can feel or know that things flow well, that will be a good transition, is practice, practice, practice. So you can write something that might look good on paper, might not feel so good. You know, so you could write a great practice, but if you haven't practiced it and felt it in your body, might not work out. Yeah. So like in your daily practice, try to avoid, so don't get too complacent and just do your, you know, some people are really into just doing the same practice and that's what they want, and you know that's why some people go to Ashtanga yoga, so they know exactly what the next pose is, what the next breath is, and maybe they've got a really stressful life and they need something that's structured. I like things to be interesting, and it's dependent on what's going on for you that day. You know, some days you like need to be taken down, or some days you need to be taken up, some days you need nurtured, and some days you need space. So what do you want to give your body that day? But so then use your asana as like your asana practice like a playground. You know, I always like to look at life as being like, you know, about having fun and being that curious observer, but fun with it. You know, let go of the fear of, oh, wonder what would happen if I tried to go into this or tried to go into that. You know, one of my 300-hour teachers, she's brilliant in the fact that she's on Instagram, and if you follow her, she's L Yoga Life, I think it is. She's really so not in her ego. She's trained as a yoga teacher, but she doesn't really teach, and I'm trying to get her to have confidence in teaching. And she was a teacher, and she's a bit younger, but something pretty awful happened to her life, and she's just dedicated her life. You know, she's got her job, and she's dedicated her life to her practice, and she is such an amazing practitioner. And her stories on Instagram, she uses her body as a, you know, playground in the sense, and it's not, she doesn't do it for the fruits of her actions. She's like, well, I'm going to work with this, and what she'll do, like the stuff that people are scared to try, and she's not scared to fall over. But it's good to see her progress and see her having fun with her practice, you know. So I would advise you guys do that with your practices. Not throw your bodies around, and I don't want you to hurt yourself, but think to yourself, oh, I wonder if that would transition well. Sometimes it doesn't feel right in your body, and that's when you know, okay. Or think, right, okay, if I try and change this up with my breath, if I, you know, breathe into and held my breath and breathe, and you'll try different things in your body with bandhas, breath retentions, and see how, and try and do it systematically. You try and figure it out, you know, right, try and figure out, okay, I'm going to try, you know, and apply these rules with the pranayama to my practice. You know, the holds after the inhale or holds after the exhale, depending on what you want to achieve. And again, see how that makes you feel. So once you felt it in your body, you can teach it better because you've got a greater understanding of it. Yeah. So, so it's so some of the another key point is making skillful transitions is to focus on the movement of your weight. So this is going to help you counterbalance your body when it's necessary. So you want to limit the weight of your body from moving too quickly in any one direction. So bringing your attention to your core, specifically your pelvis and your lower belly, is usually the most effective way to tune into your weight as it's transitioning. So an example of that would be looking at moving from warrior 1 into warrior 3. That's like a trickier transition. We've done that remember when I taught you a moon mandala class, if you were part of that live class, that we did a moon mandala and we did the transitioning of that. Oh, my tea's getting cold with all my chatting. So slowing down and mindfully moving into a balanced pose may be another effective way to teach transitions. So moving from warrior 1 to warrior 3 and then back to warrior 1. So, you know, seeing, like moving in and out. So 1 to 3 to 1 to 3, you know, like not with each breath, but trying to get people to work with that transition and find that balance is a really good way of helping people find that that mindfulness within. You know, one that I like to teach my students, and it really helps with them connect to the breath as well. In tree pose, if you move your gaze in tree pose to look up, you do feel a bit wobbly. So I get people to take their arms out, breathe in, take your arms up, look up, breathe out. So again, it allows you to really connect with the breath, smooth out the breath. So you work with samavriti, and you're working with drishtis, but also you've really got to be mindful in your practice. It's a great way of really bringing mindfulness into your asana practice and you know, bringing pranayama in as well, and that balance. Okay, so so mindful transitioning might be highlighted during movement in and out of a pose and between poses. So teaching specific actions and alignment techniques can help students to focus on the movement. So you can you can get them to really be aware of their alignment and their posture in Dandasana, staff pose, just in case because I've not taught lots of Sanskrit, I'll try and give you as much Sanskrit. You know, when you're just standing, sitting up with your legs out, staff pose, Dandasana. So just really trying to get them to stay, and you know, at the end of the day, people don't teach simple poses so much because they're like, oh, that's too, you know, it's too easy for them. Dandasana is a really difficult one, especially for people with busy heads and they want to get on. The A-type personalities go, oh my God, you know, but it teaches you that about working with your core and working with presence as well. And, you know, if you're working with Manipura chakra, you're going from Dandasana into Navasana, boat pose, they're good transitions. Okay, so working with and getting people to not hold tension in the jaw or shoulders in Navasana as well. So Vinyasa flow transitioning is important. So, but trying to slow down. So moving too quickly or moving through transitions without mindfulness can lead to poor form and potential injury. So anything done repetitively over time will naturally be a place where we tend to check out. Focusing on transitionings during flow can be particularly apt. So people who, there's a lot of people who like to go to, listen to the music, flow into it, and so they're going to yoga to check out. We're going to check in, and we want our students to check in. So particularly when addressing low back pain or when advising students to reduce intensity, in vinyasa, be careful in transition and hold poses a bit longer. I think I just brought that right in at the beginning of the course about it's okay to check in with yourself in between vinyasas, in between segments. Slow down, check in. Where are you now? So it just changes the fascial planes, it shifts the joint space. So gently moving in and out the same pose can have a similar effect. So don't rush into the next step. There isn't a rush to get there, okay? So each pose on a floor, each pose within a transition should have its own individual resonance. So when you transition into a pose, you don't need to rush. So take your time, land, stabilize, and maintain the pose that you're transitioning into. Okay, so moving into, so something that's a tricky one to teach if you've got a mixed group of people, is moving from Adho Mukha Svanasana to Chaturanga Dandasana to Urdhva Mukha Svanasana. So this is the vinyasa. So this is when you're coming into Chaturanga. So some people do not do Chaturanga. Maybe they don't have the upper body strength, the core strength. They've maybe got injuries. So I would say if you're doing a few vinyasas, start off with, and I'm sure most of you guys, if you've got teachers, they do the same. You don't jump back so much anymore. You're stepping back into plank pose, and a lot of the time you will go exhale, knees, chest, pelvis. So and then they can come into Bhujangasana, cobra pose, or upward facing dog. But you can get them to warm up in that way, and then you can say, okay, you can either continue or move into Chaturanga. So the people who already practice Chaturanga will work with Chaturanga, and just being aware that people aren't doing Chaturanga, there's like tension in with their tension here, elbows out, get them to really work with their elbows tucked in and relaxing their shoulders, and it has to be mindful, not bumping down on the ground. If they're finding Chaturanga really difficult, get them to pull back and do it on their knees down. So I would say knees, chest, pelvis. So it's a good way of allowing your body to come down. But this is why I want you to do these online reviews, and I want you to attend at least two different classes a week and still have your practice. So I want you to have your practice so you're able to feel the transition and be able to do your practices and use your intuition to take you into poses and move through your body without a teacher guiding you. But when you're going to a teacher, you're not going just to do the practice in your body, so you're somatically remembering it. I want you to listen to the cues that they give, listen to the variations, the modifications that they give. That's where you're learning when you're attending these classes. And I think this is the great thing with the online thing, where when I used to do the trainings, I'd get them to go to the class, get the teacher to say, yeah, they appeared, they turned up, tick. Now, they might have gone there, checked out, practiced the class, felt great afterwards, but they don't know why they feel great, because they've not really thought about what pose worked really well. How did they feel beforehand? How did they feel afterwards? What was a great way of their wording or articulation of a specific thing, or what was a little handy tip that helped you with your personal practice or helped you if you're going to be a teacher? So that's incredibly important, because that's what's going to help your teaching, listening to other teachers, as well as having your own practice and feeling it in your body without a teacher. You need both, you know, so you can learn from yourself and from other teachers. So, so Malasana to Bakasana, I said that was a good transition earlier. Virabhadrasana 1 to Virabhadrasana 3, I also mentioned that. Uttita Parsvakonasana to Ardha Chandrasana, yeah, so it's really about thinking about, just thinking about the transition of where the base is. If you're seated, what would flow better with where's your legs right now? What would work with that? You know, so you could go from, say, Janu Shirshasana with one knee bent, one arm, and then go, okay, from there I could take my leg over, bend that one, and come into Gomukhasana with your legs there, and then, you know, so that could transition. So you're thinking, if you're in a standing position, think about poses that have the same alignment with the feet and where your feet are on the ground. So think about your foundations. So it's the same with seated posture. Where is my legs just now? Where can I put them next that wouldn't be clunky and going, oh, and go here, and go here. So, and try it out and just see where you're at with that, okay? So let's see, what else have I got here to share with you? Teaching tips. There we go. I think I've spoken about teaching tips. So this is yeah, I think I've spoken to you about the teaching tips in that sense, but I'll share it on your site, on the site. So general alignment principles. So this is we've spoken about alignment. So let's just come back in a little bit here, because you're thinking about prioritizing the spine as well in alignment. So alignment, as I've said, you know, it's about keeping your students safe. It's not about looking good in the mat. It's not about how great your form is. Remember, it's the function of the pose. But you need to know what the alignment should be, and if that person's body is not, you know, the same as another person's body, everyone's expression of an asana will be different. So remembering that. But the positioning of the spine in each pose and in each transition can be considered the fundamental concern of a teacher and a student. So where we've put the categories of asana for Vinyasa Krama is in relation to the position of the spine, as opposed to, you know, I've given you more other lineages or other yoga practices and how they would categorize, just so that I'm not saying I'm right, they're wrong. I'm not saying that, but for you to know what you're learning is the categories that have been placed for you to help you with the biomechanics and the energetics of asana. The table of categories are in categories of the placement of the spine, and that's why Navasana is in with the forward bends, because it's a forward bend, really. It's where the, you know, where the spine is with the body, you know. So in some yoga classes that would be classed as a core strengthener, you know. So it's thinking about where the spine is. So thinking about understanding natural spinal curves. Some people you know, have issues with their spine, and we'll speak about the spine and you know, back issues you know, maybe tomorrow, actually, because so many people come to yoga with back issues, so we can speak about that. So you have a plan for moving the spine in all directions with safe sequencing, including neutralizing and counter poses. So prioritize the consideration of the spine in each type of pose. So there's not enough why in yoga classes, which is being compensated for and overshadowed by the how. You know, so many people are trying to figure out how they're going to get their leg behind their head, as opposed to why. You know, why would you do that? What's the reasoning for that? They might want to open up their hip and work with a certain chakra or something. But if it's just for an ego thing to be bendy, then so it's about looking at why do we do this and why are we going to go there. So the consequence of the approach of trying to move into the hows as opposed to the whys is that many students have memorized where each body part should go in each individual pose, but they've got very little understanding of why we do the pose in the first place. So that's why we've got great fascination with forms of poses at the expense of function. So we should start by understanding what the pose is meant to accomplish, and then based on that, guide the student into the form of the posture. So when we describe a pose, start by identifying the position of the spine. So the position of the spine gives us immediate clues about what the pose is meant to accomplish. So think about what pose does what and what you want to do with it, with that person or with yourself. So whether you're sitting, standing, the spine has natural curves which should be maintained. So maintaining just the right curves is only part of the equation. So to function efficiently, your skeletal structure also needs to be aligned vertically. That means when you're standing, your ears should be over your shoulders over your hips, and your hips over your knees and ankles. So when any body part falls out of that vertical line, the adjacent support muscles will feel the strain. So muscles don't lengthen or strengthen overnight. So as you stretch out the tight areas and strengthen the weak ones, your body will gradually find its way to a more balanced alignment. The goal isn't to achieve perfection, it's to find the healthiest alignment, one that makes you feel simultaneously strong and at ease. So we're looking at Stiram Sukham. So again, start with the foundation. You know, I always say that you build the foundation before you can grow. So really feel strong and stable if you're on a standing posture. Really, you know, I see so many people practicing warrior poses with the back heel up, and then they're all over the place. You see that in a lot of vinyasa classes. You know, they don't realize that back, you know, the outside edge of the back foot is there to ground in the front big toe. So that's something that I always teach, that it's something that I maybe say it too much and my students are like, oh my goodness, but it's a really great way of getting people to really ground before they lift and grow. So outside edge of the back foot is pressed down, front big toe in most of the standing postures, just to really get that connection. So the foundation is a part of the body in connection to the earth. So we were speaking about as well twists. You have standing supine and seated twists. The seated twists are the most, the largest version of a twist, but it's which you need to have one anchoring point in a twist. Like if it's a seated twist, it's the hips. So when the hips are the anchor, that's when the twist can but you're in supine, and so you've also got different parts of the body that's going to anchor. So the foundation would be the feet in standing poses, the hands in inversions, the bottom and pelvis in a seated twist. So this principle advises that proper setup of poses relies first and foremost on a proper foundation. So the next step is aligning and stacking bones to the advantage of gravity. So this leads to an optimum positioning where little or no muscular effort is required. So, you know, it's like working as if you are part of nature, but you know, it shouldn't be, you're getting to your edge, but it's not with lots of effort where you're pushing. It should feel challenging, but effortless. So yoga postures approach effortlessness, where we align the long axis of the bones with the direction of gravity. So this decreases the muscular force needed to maintain our postures. For example, in Uttanasana, standing forward bend, I'm throwing in all the Sanskrit at you today, the force of gravity aligns with the long axis of the femur and the tibia bones. So you should be studying your David Keel anatomy. I know some of you already know a lot of anatomy, but if you've not done that, you'll know. If you go into your David Keel anatomy training, you'll start to learn about the femur and the tibia. So similarly, in Siddhasana, the force of gravity aligns with the long axis of the spine. So Siddhasana is a seated position. So use muscular force to bring the bones into a position where they carry the load. So once these positions are attained, muscular force is no longer necessary or is greatly decreased. Okay, so make sure that your foundations are built. So when standing, focus on your feet and leg alignment. A good articulation on the alignment of the legs in Warrior 2 is I quite like to tell them to move their front kneecap towards the front pinky toe. It helps to open up your hips a bit more, a bit slightly, yeah. When on all fours, often hips are aligned over the knees and shoulders of the wrists, and sometimes hands are placed forward of shoulders. So being aware of where the hands and the knees are, if you're on all fours. In arm balances, keep wrists aligned with the front of the mat and weight distributed evenly across the palm. So really, there's bandhas in the hands, there's energy points. So really make sure you press down, build your foundation before you can grow in any sort of arm balancing as well. So really spread your fingers evenly and fingers aligned with the metacarpals. So if you're not beginning from the foundation, some teachers begin from the core. Some people are saying, right, really work from Uddiyana Bandha will get you to really align properly. So it's what works for you in your practice, what feels right for you, and also it's sometimes dependent on the type of practice you're teaching or you're practicing or where you're at or what energy you're going to be using. So I would be working with alignment principles of the core if I'm doing perhaps a Manipura chakra practice. But if you're working with building the foundations and starting with foundations, that might be a Muladhara practice where you're really working with grounding and security and safety. So that's another consideration. So it's not necessarily just about the anatomical side of things. As you know from my teachings, that it's not all about the anatomy for me. I really work with all of the different parts. So the priority sometimes can be focused on the core positioning, and unlike a building that's built from the ground up, in our mother's womb, we did not first grow fingers and toes, then feet and hands, then ankles and wrists. We developed from our core outwards. So this is from Bernie Clark, who's a yin yoga teacher. So everyone has a different perspective. So I'm teaching you lots of different perspectives from lots of different other teachers. So the foundational stuff is from Ray Long, who wrote, oh, my battery's running out. So Ray Long is an anatomy specialist, and he wrote a lot of the anatomy books that used to be some of my the training, the reading requirements for the trainings. So Ray Long's books are great for the anatomy side of things. So, but Bernie Clark is a yin yoga teacher, and I think I'm teaching you from my perspective, but I also like to give you other great yoga teachers perspectives too, and that also gives you like the spiritual scriptures from all different perspectives, so you can build on that and take it, you know, the way you learn, the way that you want to learn, and take it in and apply it to your life and your practice, as opposed to me throwing all my opinions on you. I'm giving you, I've studied a lot of this and got as much information from different yoga teachers and you know, yoga practices, so that you can find your way. Okay, so you know, we're not built from the ground up. We didn't grow our fingers and toes, feet and hands. So Bernie Clark thinks that we should build postures similarly, from the core outwards, from proximal to distal. So he thinks that the focus should also be an inner spaciousness throughout transitioning as well. So it's about moving from your core stabilizing muscles first, by keeping inner spaciousness top priority as you transition from pose to pose. Holding your height, stepping forwards, holding your height and twist. So there's quite a few yoga teachers that think like that. I do think you should have, you come from the foundations, but I also think that you should really be aware of practicing with an engagement of Uddiyana. I really work with Uddiyana a lot, and that's why when I started studying Yin, I started practicing Yin, that was a difficult one, because you have to let go. I'm like, oh no, I'm used to Ujjayi breathing, I'm used to engaging Uddiyana, I'm used to Jalandhar Bandha. But I think it's good to step out of your comfort zone. So Bernie Clark thinks that the position of the hands and feet are the least important thing happening in a yoga posture, but bear in mind, he's a Yin yoga teacher, okay? So this is different perspectives. So I'm not trying to confuse you by giving you different things, okay? I just like to keep you on your toes, that's all. Yeah, at least you're by me throwing in different stuff, you're like, what, she said that a few minutes ago. It means that your eyeballs aren't rolling back in your head. Well, hopefully not. So Bernie Clark, Yin man, he doesn't think that the positions of the hands and the feet, he doesn't think they're important in a yoga posture, but they're often the most visible part of the pose, and they draw the most attention and modifications. So that's not to say that positions of your hands and feet are unimportant, but these positions are dictated first and foremost by what's happening in your core. A dogmatic assertion that your feet must be parallel and pointing straight ahead ignores the reality of your anatomical uniqueness and the importance of the core first and foremost. What is happening in your hip sockets is the primary determinant of where your feet will point, followed by the shape of your femur, and what is happening at your knees, the shape of your tibia, and what is happening at your ankles. To start to structure your posture by beginning with the feet is like the tail wagging the dog. So it's a little bit like, so this is like the compression and tension thing that I'm speaking about, which is changes the thing in your practice. I was speaking about alignment, I think it was yesterday, all the days are rolling into one actually. And my student, Michelle, who, if she was going to be really working with the alignment of Warrior One, she'd be very unstable, because heel to heel and hip square, it was just not viable. So by opening her legs slightly and not being heel to heel and having her hip square, she's found that foundation of Warrior One. And I think that is really what Bernie Clark is trying to say. I don't think he's trying to reiterate or say that the core is the most important. I think what he's saying is everyone's bodies are unique, and it shouldn't be about, this is the rules of the alignment of the posture. It's where is your bone structure and what works with what, because you don't want to be pushing yourself into a posture with this great alignment, but you're going to end up putting your back out by doing something outrageous because you want to look good on your mat or do the right thing. So how I would say, how does it feel in your body? Does it feel, do you feel stable? Do you feel calm? Do you feel the strength? There should be an edge. It should have a challenge. You're not there to check out. There shouldn't be pain, but you also should feel stable. And so it's not, again, about the form, it's about the function. So be aware of muscle pairs as well in your alignment. So when one muscle contracts, another stretches. So being aware of the muscle pairs, the agonist and the antagonist, involved in actions that can help a student to deepen their experience for posture with constant conscious focus. So you'll learn a little bit more about that with the David Keel anatomy course. And you know, the good thing nowadays is they're teaching functional anatomy as opposed to just anatomy, like the dry anatomy that you would learn in a book, that some of it wouldn't be so relevant to yoga teaching. You know, so when I just studied anatomy, we had to say where the muscle joined onto that bone and where it, you know, and where it, you know, which one, you know, we had to be really specific, and it wasn't really relevant to the pose that we were in. You know, I think it's important to know about the important muscles, the important bones, what you're going to achieve, what you can achieve, whether it's, and then when you know about, you know, where they are and what they're doing, then you'll know in a pose which muscle could be strengthened and stretched to improve that posture. There's books and books and books. I'm going to be doing it from part of the 300 hour, the 500 hour, on the psoas muscle. It's spelled with a P. It's a silent P. It's all very strange. PSOAS. The psoas muscle, it's meant to be the muscle of the soul. It's a really important muscle. It's a really intricate, long muscle that goes deep into the inner groin. And I don't suffer from a very tight psoas muscle because I do a lot of yoga practice and I don't do a lot of running and walking. So I need to balance that out. But runners and athletes have tight psoas muscles. And working with lunges, crescent moon poses, deep inner groin stretches will stretch out the psoas muscle. But it's a really long, intricate muscle that has been linked to more you know, energetic, you know, how everything is connected. So it can be linked to different psychological or emotional things. And I don't know if this is relevant for Marie Claire and her chronic pain patients. But the psoas muscle is this is another new sort of thing, but I did study it in part of my 500 hours, so it's not as new as the vagus nerve. But if you do want to look deeper, you've already got loads of information. But if you want to learn more, the psoas muscle is a really interesting muscle to learn about. So we've spoken quite a bit about alignment, about teaching, about transitioning. We spoke earlier about how to teach or practice according to the moon cycles. And earlier today we did a practice that is really good for toning the vagal nerve, but it's also good for calming you down. It's a really lovely, I think it's a Buddhist meditation. I need to look it up. But Nada Brahma is the meditation that we did. And then we really went into the brain and what the anatomical side of the brain, but how it works with yoga and how headstands are really important with that. But I'm not saying throw in a headstand in every single yoga practice, but headstands are kind of overlooked a lot. You know, in the Western world, they're kind of maybe looked at for, oh, that'd be good for an Instagram picture or something, but there's no counterbalance, no build up to it. There's not really many people speak about the power of a headstand. You know, Iyengar will write books about what Krishnamacharya taught him to. Iyengar was basically like a disabled little boy, and Krishnamacharya gave him, specific, things to work with, and and headstand was one of them. So very interesting stuff. Well, it's for me, and hopefully I'm not boring you. So on that note, I'm going to stop recording and see if anyone's got any questions.